field because coarse wool is a little bit on the rough side. This is actually Cotswold wool from one of our sheep. We got a Cotswold sheep, which is a breed of sheep, because it's very strong and it's good for weaving. And my partner Mary Ann also loves to weave. And so we got that so that it could be put onto the loom and wouldn't break. But now think about how that would feel if it were against certain sensitive parts of your skin. Not very good. However, that is the wool that they had in those years, and because of the cold winters in Maine, they were grateful for it. I'm told that school children actually all learned to knit from the time they started school at a very young age. And every school child knitted 2 pairs of socks every year. One for themselves and one for someone else who needed them. So think about it. 2 pairs of socks from the time you started school. And I understand that that practice continued on well into the 1920s and 1930s. And what a shame that we don't continue to do that still to this day, because it's just such a wonderful thing to think of, every child knowing how to knit that well at such a young age. So you'd have the sheep. The sheep would be shorn, and they would be shorn by hand with hand shears. Not nearly as nice as the scissors we use to trim our sheep, and certainly no electric shears in those days. So shearing sheep probably took close to an hour. And most farms might have had maybe 10 to 20 sheep. So that was a day's work as it was. I'm told that in some cases they would take the sheep out into a stream before they were shorn and sort of wash the wool a little bit in the stream. I can't even imagine doing that. We don't do that now, but in those days, I guess it probably was a little cleaner by doing that. So once the wool is shorn, the next thing they do is pick out as much vegetation as possible. And to this day, that's what we do. We lay it out on a big table and just hand pick out all the little bits of hay and grain that's in it. Now, if this were a big operation, like some people send their wool off to a place in Michigan called Xyliners. There are other big places that do large quantities. They scour the wool, and they use a very strong chemical which actually dissolves the vegetation in the fleeces. Now, this is a large production operation, so those chemicals are never really totally washed out of the wool. Many people think they're allergic to wool, but in reality they may indeed be allergic to the chemicals they use when they scour the wool. So I encourage people always to try wool from small farms like ours where we use no such chemicals, and the wool is a more pure form of wool and therefore less likely to cause the allergic reactions. Some people are really allergic to wool, and they can tell pretty readily.
And sometimes it's because wool has little sort of hooks, which is what makes it felt.
Well, it has to do with the coarseness, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have some samples here to pass around also. And you can see, still get vegetation all the time. But these little samples of wool are from our sheep now. These are all natural colors of our sheep, and some of them, these 2 particular ones, are a combination of sheep and goat, 50-50. So these 2 are a little different. This one has a little bunny fur in it, because it's really fuzzy and very, very soft. And then this is 100% wool, and so is this, but from a very fine, they've bred sheep over the years so that now the wool is much finer and hence much softer and much more pleasant to your skin. You wouldn't find any trouble with putting those against your skin, I'm sure. Okay, so we have gotten the sheep shorn and we have picked all the vegetation out by hand, and now comes the washing. And in olden times, they would have used a big tub, and they would have to heat the water up on a fire until it got hot enough, and they would put the wool into the hot water, and a lot of the lanolin would come out, and they'd have to wash it and rinse it and wash it and rinse it. Now today, I do a wash, a rinse, a wash, a rinse, and a rinse in my washing machine. So I don't think they probably did that 150 years ago. They probably just did a minimalist approach. In fact, Have you, any of you heard of spinning in the grease? In some cases, they actually spin the wool without washing it at all, so that it has all the lanolin in it. And so when that is spun, it actually has some advantages because it is practically waterproof. And so if it is spun in the grease and then knitted into a garment, hats or mittens or a sweater, it will shed the water much, much better. So that was a common practice many years ago. I've tried it. I don't particularly like spinning in the grease, but some people still do that. It smells, by the way, if you spin in the grease. It smells like a sheep.
And it gets on your hands.
Yeah, it gets on your hands. Actually, that's one of the things I do like about picking the vegetation out of the wool that has the lanolin in it, is it does make your hands feel very nice. And I don't know if any of you have children or grandchildren or know anyone who breastfeeds. Somewhere along the way I became a lactation consultant as well. And one of the products these days that is very good for breastfeeding mothers is Lancino cream or lanolin cream, and it is a very pure form of lanolin from sheep. And it is used to heal sore skin. I recommend it highly for diaper rash. I recommend it for cracked lips and all kinds of little skin irritations because it has healing properties and is very good. And it makes one's hands feel very nice in that process of picking all the vegetation out of the wool. Okay, so we've got it washed now and dried, which would have involved spreading it out on the grass probably many, many years ago. Would have been spread out on the grass and allowed to dry in the sun. Now I lay it out on racks, preferably out in the sun, but if I can't get it out in the sun, I do it over a bathtub. Someday I'm going to have a better arrangement than that, but right now. And then so once it's dry, it is something like, in consistency, something like this. I've actually picked this up a little bit. So the next step would be to pull it apart like this by hand. And you're actually just pulling the pieces apart. And then, if you wanted to, you could dye it. And as you can see, this has been dyed. And the dye that I use for this particular wool is amaranth. Have any of you seen amaranth? That's that deep burgundy color. They actually use the grains for in salads and for bread making, I understand. So amaranth. And actually, a lot of the dyeing that I do creates yellows. In case you hadn't noticed, there's a lot of yellows. Onion skins makes this lovely yellow. This was amaranth. The first time I tried it, look at the difference. So there's a certain element of mystery and unpredictability in it. But I've been doing quite a bit of dyeing with things like dandelions and marigolds. Here's marigolds.
So you just soak the flowers?
Okay. You pick the flowers, and in some cases you use the leaves, in some cases you use the blossoms, in some cases you use the whole plant. You can also use bark, you can use walnut hulls. You can use all kinds of things. You can use lichen, and whatever you use it as a dye stuff. The books say you take about a pound of dye stuff and about a pound of wool, okay, and that's your starting point. So you chop the dye stuff up into small little pieces and put it in the water. Like if I were starting on a Friday, I'd put it in the water like Friday afternoon and I'd let it soak overnight. And then on Saturday, I'd bring it up on the stove to a simmer, and I'd let it simmer for 2 or 3 hours. And then I'd take it off the heat and let it sit for another 24 hours. On Sunday, I would bring it up to a simmer again, simmer it for 2 or 3 hours, take it off the heat, set it aside, and let it cool. And then the next day, I might look at the color of the water and see how deeply colored the water might be. And I might do that another 2 or 3 more days, okay? So that by this time, there's a lot of color in the water. Then I strain it from one pot into another pot using a colander and try to get as much of the dye stuff out of the water as I can. And then I put the wool in the colored water, put it on the stove, bring it up to a simmer, let it simmer for 2 or 3 hours, turn off the heat, let it sit overnight, do the same thing. And so we're getting close to a week now.